way is the right way, I might say. Nobody doing it better, y'all some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles, got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the TWSN.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Sit Down Morning Show with Malik Wright, presented by TWSN. I'm your host, Malik Wright, joined by my co-host, who's on the ones and Tuesdays, Danielle Almeida. We got a jam-packed show, a lot of stuff to get into, a lot of stuff to talk about. But before we do, make sure you guys do us a favor. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. It's been a busy week, but it's Friday, Fantasy Football Fridays here on the Sit Down. But before we jump into all that, I want to start it over with the UFC really quickly. I want to start it over in the UFC. Jon Jones posted Alex Pereira posted an interesting story on his Instagram where he talked about Dana White would love to know what's going on in this conversation. And I could only think of one thing. Why tag the boss of the UFC, the promoter of the UFC, the person who directly has a hands in building fights like these, unless you're planning for a Jon Jones, Alex Pereira fight after Jon Jones hopefully successfully defends his heavyweight championship against a Stipe Miocic. That's the only thing I could think of right now, because think of the time frame. Well, the latest potential contender for the light heavyweight championship probably is not going to be ready to fight because they're fighting this weekend in Alexander Rakic and Magomed Ankalaev. Jon Jones fights Stipe here in the coming month. The time frame just makes a little bit more sense. And if you ask me, I think Jon Jones might leave that fight unscathed. So I think the turnaround time is a lot quicker. I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. And maybe Jon Jones is planning to dupe everybody and say, hey, I'm going to take on Alex Pereira. Alex is already naturally a heavyweight guy. But I think this speaks to a bigger issue. And I'll tell you what that issue is. But Danny, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, I think that when you look at these two potentially fighting, I think that my biggest issue, my biggest question mark about this, Malik, is the fact that I think that Jon Jones has some other serious issues to figure out. I think that Jon Jones has to look at himself in the mirror, and obviously the dude can look at himself and say, yes, I'm the GOAT. And if I beat Stipe, my career is done. And if he does go out that way, Malik, that's fine. Okay, whatever. He can go out however he wants. But it raises the bigger question to me. Hey, is he the type of guy to where he knows right now that he's done? He knows that he can't beat the Alex Pereira. He knows that he can't beat Tom Aspinall. And quite honestly, Malik, if that's the case, I just want him to come out outright and say that. And obviously he's very likely not going to say, oh, I can't beat Tom Aspinall. I can't beat Alex Pereira. But come out and just say that, right? If you are satisfied with your career and you don't want to fight these guys, not because you're happy with your career, but because your time has passed, you're not the best of the best right now, then just come out right and say that. I think that's what my concern is with this, right? And the reason why I say that's my concern, there's a guy by the name of Tom Aspinall, and I know you'll want to touch on this a little bit, but Tom Aspinall is the interim heavyweight champion. He has won the title and he has defended said title. But there is a guy by the name of Jon Jones that has a title, and this is the first time in UFC history, I believe, that we have somebody holding an interim title and somebody holding a championship title, and both of those guys are reigning at the same exact time. I don't know if that's ever happened before, Malik. I don't know, and I could be wrong. I don't know if somebody's ever defended an interim title before like Tom Aspinall is. And my connection back to this main topic is Tom Aspinall is the guy at heavyweight right now. He is the guy to beat. And it seems like if Jon Jones were to take this Alex Pereira fight, that would concern me even more. And the reason why is it would show me that Jon Jones is still willing to fight. Jon Jones is still ready to fight. And Alex Pereira is arguably the baddest man on the UFC roster right now. But he is not, and this is just my opinion, he is not the caliber of fighter at the heavyweight division I think that can beat John Jones versus a Tom Aspinall is. I think Alex Pereira can beat John Jones, but I think Tom Aspinall is the guy to beat John Jones. And that's just where my concern is with this. So all around, I think that the UFC is in the business of making big time fights. And I think the UFC would be stupid not to make this fight. I just don't know if John Jones wants this fight. And that's the situation with this. And that's where my thought process is on John Jones. So, Malik, I went back, and like I said, I'm a UFC fan, but I'll admit I wasn't a UFC fan during John Jones's real, title reign 5, 6, 7 years ago when he was at his prime. And I see a different side of John Jones right now. And that's what I don't know if, John Jones is going to go down, in my opinion, as the undisputed GOAT of the UFC. I think John Jones is definitely holding that title right now, but how he navigates these next 3 months, these next 6 months, the end of his career, I think will tell me a lot about the type of person he is. And that's what I'm just curious to know. So a Pereira John Jones fight, I think, would be massive for the UFC. And I think that they should do that. But I also feel like the guy by the name of Tom Aspinall is getting screwed out of this so heavily. And I feel like it's because John Jones knows that he isn't of the younger generation. He knows that if he goes into a fight with Tom Aspinall, that he has everything to lose. And in my opinion, I feel like John Jones isn't confident about a Tom Aspinall fight. And I think that's where it really comes down to is, hey, people are saying John Jones is not ducking Tom Aspinall. Oh, you think John Jones is scared of Tom Aspinall? If you want me to be honest, yes. And that's what I think my biggest takeaway for this is, hey, I think a Pereira John Jones fight is realistic. And the reason why I think John Jones would be interested in taking that fight versus Tom Aspinall is because of the main deficiency of Alex Pereira is the ground game. And that's where I think John Jones would look to take advantage. He would say, hey, I'm the bigger man. I think that I could beat, Alex Pereira by taking him down. And it's been shown in the past, if Alex Pereira can get taken down, he can get controlled versus a Tom Aspinall, I think is a much, much, much different matchup for him. So all around, I'd be curious to see what happens. But like I said, I think if John Jones fights Alex, first off, I'll obviously give him respect for taking that fight. But the guy by the name of Tom Aspinall, I'm very confident if John Jones were to do anything else besides entertain a fight with Tom Aspinall, if he were to, fight Alex Pereira, he's ducking Tom Aspinall, in my opinion. I don't know if you see it that way, but
so you said a lot. You
Yeah.
took some stuff that I wanted to say.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I personally think that it's a strategic move by John Jones. This is a strategic move, in my opinion, by John Jones. And I think that this is a move because let's face it, if John Jones goes on and beats Stipe Miocic like everyone is expecting him to do, if he decides to take on Alex Pereira, the talk of John Jones or heavyweight reign not being legit, or the talk of John Jones ducking said Tom Aspinall goes out the window because Alex Pereira right now is being looked at as the scariest guy in the UFC. Excuse me. Wow. Yeah, he's right now being looked at as the scariest guy in the UFC. So when you think about it, him taking on an Alex Pereira absolves him of all that. And for me, I think there's a double-edged sword here. I think that, a lot of people wanted to see Francis Ngannou versus a John Jones, and you don't get that anymore. So what do you do if you're John Jones? You take on the scariest puncher in the UFC, and Alex Pereira. And if you wind up beating that guy, nobody else says anything. Nobody else feels that you owe us anything. Nobody else feels like you owe us to fight a Tom Aspinall. That being said, with how highly I rate in Alex Pereira, I still believe Tom Aspinall is the much tougher challenge for John Jones. I think John Jones sees a clear path to victory for an Alex, which is taking him down, because John was a great collegiate wrestler. He has the wrestling chops. I think his path to victory is to take Alex Pereira down, drown him, submit him, or win via ground and pound. I think that's a world in which he can do whatever he'd like to against an Alex Pereira if the fight hits the ground. It's much harder to take Alex down than people give credit, but that's his path to victory. The next thing, though, when you look at a guy like Tom Aspinall, I firmly believe John Jones is looking at it and saying, okay, what is my path to victory versus a Tom Aspinall? And maybe there is a path to victory for him to beat a Tom Aspinall, but I feel like in John Jones's thought process, the path to beat Alex is much simpler and smoother than it is to beat Tom Aspinall. Daniel, what say you?
Yeah, I think that when you look at these guys, you're right, and that's what it comes down to. And like I said, I think if John Jones were to retire after the Stipe fight, what can we say? We can be critical and we can say, yes, he's ducking. I think, in my opinion, and this is what I believe, I think that John Jones is smart. I think that John Jones knows what he's doing. And I don't necessarily fault him for this, right? I think that every fighter does have a lifespan. I think every fighter, when you look at them, that they do have a certain moment in their career where they aren't going to be of the upper echelon. Father Time is undefeated. So I think that while John Jones, I look at him and let's say if he were to retire after Stipe or if he were to go after Alex Pereira, like I believe in my heart that he is going to be ducking a Tom Aspinall. I believe in my heart that he knows what's good for him. And I believe that he knows that at this point in his career, he is getting older. And he said it on many occasions. Hey, this is the new generation. These guys are different. And I respect them for it. So that's what I think about John Jones. So I think that John knows where he's at in his career. And that's why I think for me, I would be very, very honestly, I'd be shocked to see him take a Pereira or a.
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't.
I wouldn't.
Okay.
I wouldn't. You don't flirt with the idea of fighting Alex. You don't FaceTime the guy. They don't tag you, Dana White. They've been talking about this has been a thing they've been flirting with for months.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, but it's not necessarily, a thing of which he's scared to take the Alex fight. I think he's very open to take the Alex fight because he sees a path to victory. I don't believe he's open to taking the Tom Aspinall fight. In the way of combat sports, if a guy's an interim champion, the interim champion fights the actual champion when the actual champion's ready to fight. The only other time that I can remember where we saw an interim championship about to be defended was when Rafael dos Anjos was about to fight Conor McGregor. He pulled out of the fight. And then that's when, Conor obviously won the interim belt and all that kind of stuff like that. Then he fought Jose Aldo. That's what I remember. But this isn't a regular practice. You don't get to see the interim champion not get a shot at the actual champion when the actual champion is healthy. But again, you also don't get actual champions like John Jones, who've been around the promotion for so long, who's considered the UFC GOAT, who has a lot of chops for all the correct reasons. You don't get to see this quite often. And, I want to push back on a couple of things. Dottie D, I love John Jones. John Jones is one of my favorite fighters of all time. I disagree. He said he was going to fight Francis. He's not ducking smoke. Well, that's easy to say once Francis was out of the promotion. But let's remember the UFC negotiated and tried to put together a contract with John Jones for 2 years to have him fight Francis Ngannou. And he kept saying it was about the money, after he had already had a contract in place with the UFC. Francis fights his last fight in his UFC contract, leaves, and then all of a sudden John Jones makes his UFC debut against Cyril Gane, who once again has a zero wrestling. So for me, I think that the timing was very interesting of it. And I don't blame him. He's 37 years old. He's been fighting for however long he's been fighting for. He doesn't want to take as much injury, but come out and say that. Don't say that you're the baddest person on the planet. I don't believe John Jones in his heart wanted to fight Francis Ngannou. It's easy to talk about it now when a guy's in another promotion and you're in a whole nother promotion and the chances of those two promotions coming together to create a colossal fight like that are non-existent. It's not happening. But I hate this idea that, he wasn't ducking Francis Ngannou. So you just magically, automatically make your UFC heavyweight debut right after the guy leaves, right? That's what you do, right? So to me, there was a little bit of I won't say ducking because I have a lot of respect for these fighters. I would say it was a calculated effort. It was a calculated effort. I think it was a calculated effort on John Jones's part. And the last thing I'll say is, for those people that are saying he's 37, remember how many years John Jones was not fighting, right? Look at how many years John Jones was not active, how many years he did get suspended, how many years where he was not fighting on a consistent basis. Hey, I don't know. If it was me, I would think John Jones would want to make up for lost time. He'd want to make up for lost time. We saw him train for 2.5 years to, you know what I'm doing? I'm then going to make my UFC debut at the heavyweight. He made his UFC debut at heavyweight. We haven't seen him since.
Mm-hmm.
In his first fight at heavyweight, he fought a guy who just lost to that guy in Francis Ngannou, and he beat the guy within seconds. So to me, it's very simple. John Jones has a lot of ground to make up at the heavyweight division. An Alex Pereira fight absolves him for the cherry picking of when to move up to heavyweight. But make no mistake about it, he is cherry picking to fight Alex Pereira if he chooses to do so after this fight. This is a nod. If I'm Tom Aspinall, don't take this any other way. This is a nod. This is John Jones saying Tom Aspinall is a bad dude. And guess what? Maybe younger John could have took on him, but right now, I don't believe that at this stage of my career, I can give that my best shot. I think that's a nod. I think that's a respectful nod to Tom Aspinall. And I think it's also real. I think it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
I don't love it. I want to see Tom versus John. I really do want to see that opportunity for all these fight fans out there. But if John chooses to go the Alex Pereira route, it's going to be interesting because Tom is going to be in the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Tom's going to be in the crowd for that fight. So I'm excited to see what takes place. Guys, do us a favor. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or upload content from the TWSN studios. Daniel, keeping it with the fighting. Jake Paul, Mike Tyson planning to fight each other. What's there left for Mike Tyson to prove? I don't know. Roll the clip.
Don't charge at me, Tyson.
Nice left hook. Up. It was good for today. Yeah. I truly believe. You sure?
Yeah, me
yes.
too.
You fucking sure?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. You sure?
Yes.
Fuck with me, it's all right? Let's do this.
You did great.
We're done.
We're gonna do it.
You sure? Yes.
Yeah.
Trust me. I got a lot in me. It's work, boy. Let's get started.
So for me, what does Mike Tyson have to prove? What does Mike Tyson have to prove by going in there with a Jake Paul? What's there left for him to prove after all this time away? For me, Jake Paul fight doesn't do it for me. It doesn't do it for me. And I don't want to see an older Mike Tyson get hurt out there. I don't want to see him get hurt out there. I want to see him, healthy. I want to see him just enjoying his retirement. As cool as it is to say for Jake Paul that, hey, I beat Mike Tyson. But, I just don't know. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Daniel?
Yeah, I think that when you look at it and I look at this fight, I think that, looking at Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, it really is going to be up to, I'm not too concerned about, Jake Paul, and I'm not too concerned about, how this fight looks for a Jake Paul, because at the end of the day, respectfully, Mike Tyson is older. Mike Tyson is 50 something. And that's what concerns me about this is like, hey man, you're taking a big name fight and you're going to make a lot of money off this. So I respect him for this. And I think that Mike Tyson is doing apparently what he thinks is best for him. And I think that Mike Tyson is doing what he wants to do. Do I think that this is a smart move for Mike Tyson to face a younger guy by 20 something years? Probably not. I hope that this thing isn't something just for money. I hope this is something that he feels in his heart. But I think that when I look at this fight in general, I don't know what this does for Jake Paul's legacy. This doesn't do it for me. All this tells me, in my opinion, is Jake Paul is looking to make a big name fight. He's looking to make a lot of money. And that's really what it is. Is this Jake Paul looking to the future? And is this Jake Paul looking to, win a title against Canelo to become a better boxer? No, that's not what this is. This is a fight for a big name, to get more eyeballs on him, to get more eyeballs on his company, to get more eyeballs on the sport. That's what this is. But is this a thing to where Jake Paul is really trying to come out and be the best boxer ever? I don't think so. I don't think you do that if you're fighting somebody who's 56 years old. And once again, Mike Tyson obviously has a puncher's chance. But man, I think that from what we've seen out of Mike Tyson, from, just his physical state. Yes, he's training, and yes, he's sparring, and yes, it looks like he's great on pads, but there's been many clips where this dude's struggling to walk. There's been many clips where he is just physically not there. And I think that that's what it does after spending 20 years, your entire life fighting. So I'm definitely concerned when it comes to a Mike Tyson and what that fight's going to look like in there. So all around, I think that this fight is an exciting fight. This fight is something where it's entertaining, but I'm going to be kind of concerned watching this fight. Like I said, I don't know if I've ever seen a fight with somebody who's beyond 50 years old. I don't know how old Anderson Silva is. I believe he's in his 40s. So I saw that boxing fight, but I just be concerned. So all around, this is a big name fight. This is something to where the fans are going to definitely tune into this. I know I'm going to watch this, but at the end of the day, is this a serious fight? Is this something where I'm really giving, him respect for this? No, I think that this is really just, this is basically a side quest for Jake Paul. And this is something where he gets to look back on and say, hey, I fought the scariest boxer of all time, albeit 30 years, 20 years after his prime, but I still did that. So I think that Jake Paul, this is exactly what he's been doing. This is nothing new. And I think that it's entertaining. It's good for getting eyeballs on his company. It is good for getting eyeballs on the sport. But what does this do for his legacy, Malik? I don't know what this does. It's whatever. It's entertaining.
I don't really care about Jake Paul's
yeah.
legacy. I care about the health of Mike Tyson. I
Yes.
care about what could happen to Mike Tyson by doing this fight. While Jake Paul's looking, while Mike Tyson's looking at this as an exhibition or a sideshow, Jake Paul's really going in there to try to finish this guy in a big way. So for me, that's my thought process on it. Do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Hey, I want to head on over to the NFL over in New York. The Giants recently came out, made a statement basically talking about how they're committed to the future of Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. And, I think this is a very bold strategy. It's the first time in a while I've seen ownership group come out and pretty much already talk about, they talk about the future and the hopes for this football team while also, raising, not raising, but pretty much addressing that, hey, we haven't been up to the standard that we want to be, but we're happy where we are, and what our future potentially holds with keeping a Brian Daboll, a Joe Schoen in place. I have my thoughts on the Giants outlook, but Danny, what are your thoughts on there?
Yeah, I think that when I look at the Giants, I think it's a good look. And what I mean by that is I'm not looking the past 4 years. I'm not looking the past 6 years. And I think that that's something hopefully they can look in themselves in the mirror and say, hey, we messed up. We messed up signing Daniel Jones. We messed up, with our previous head coach, Joe Judge. We messed up, but we're not going to make that same mistake again. And I think that when I look at this situation, you have to give coaches, you have to give players time to marinate. You have to give them time to develop. And it just sets a bad precedent if you go and replace your GM every 2 years, if you go in and replace your head coach every 2 years. So I think it's a good move. I think that what they're doing is smart. And I think it is smart because if you ask yourself this question, for everybody watching, once again, we appreciate you guys watching and tuning in. Ask yourself this question: how often does an owner, how often does a front office give a head coach who is clearly on the hot seat, how often do they give them a vote of confidence during the season? And maybe I'm wrong, but very, very few times. Obviously, Jerry Jones did it this year with the Mike McCarthy, but very few times have I seen a front office say, hey, we are sticking with this guy. And if we're going to make a decision, we can figure that out in the offseason. But I trust this guy. And I think that's the right move. I think that's the right culture move. And I think that at least this lets Brian Daboll coach like he doesn't feel like somebody's right on my ass because I could get fired next week. And you go look at so many of these coaches that have been fired in the NFL. Look at Robert Saleh. A lot of the times they think they're good. And then they show up to, the building one day and then they're gone. So I think that this vote of confidence is important for Brian Daboll. I think it's important for this locker room. I think it's important for the coaching staff. My flip side of it is this doesn't absolve the GM. This doesn't absolve the front office of the mistakes that they've made to get to this point. And I think that's where hopefully this offseason they can look at themselves in the mirror and say, hey, we're not going to just go with something because we didn't, because we feel like we have to uphold, that decision we made 3 years ago, mainly the Daniel Jones contract, right? So that's my philosophy personally is, hey, if you messed up 2 years ago, why are you still trying to uphold that F up today? If you messed up and you feel like you can change that, change it now. But I don't feel like Brian Dable is the root of these issues. So I think that's why it's
Mhm.
smart for the Giants. I think that this would be a major mistake. Go look at the Raiders, Malik. Go look at these other teams that have filtered in head coaches time and time and time again. How do you let a team build a culture? Like, and especially in New York, right? That's a conversation that we have about Dallas so much. Hey, Dallas is like a zoo. Dallas, we got fans walking up to players and knocking on, the window and waving at them do something when they're working out. I think New York, and I could be wrong, but I feel like New York is very similar in the sense of it's a big market. You got the media all over you, and there is a lot of eyeballs on your team and a lot of outside circumstances. So for me, if you can zone those out and say, hey, our head coach is our head coach, we're rolling with him,
Mhm.
and figure out the rest of the shit later this offseason, I feel like you're putting yourself in a good position. So I like what they're doing with Brian Dable. I think it's important. Give him some confidence. And I think a lot of these issues could be solved when you figure out, hey, what is your pathway forward at the quarterback position this upcoming offseason? But like I said, I think I was very impressed. And maybe I'm reading into this too much, but I was very impressed by them saying, hey, you're our guy this season. And his direct words were, hey, if something needs a change in the offseason, we can talk about it then, but we are not doing anything in season. So I really respect it, to be honest.
Yeah, I like the fact that the Giants are showing some continuity and some patience a little bit there with Brian Dable because I believe he is a good coach. I think that he needs an opportunity to get his quarterback in here. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of takes place, and if the Giants are going to be able to put together a winning football team, with Brian Dable at the helm and Joe Schoen in the front office. Um, let's talk about some of the buyers and sellers at this year's trade deadline and some teams that we're looking at, who we think could potentially, you know, move the needle to help their season's cause, or even teams that might be potentially selling. So, Daniel.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of teams, and I want to start off, with the sellers. And obviously, Malik, you can tell me to shut up whenever. The biggest team I think is the Las Vegas Raiders. I think the Raiders need to be sellers. I think the Raiders need to be in a position where the guys that you got on your squad, yes, you've got to build, but you're in a position where in my opinion, I think this offseason is going to be a massive, massive change for this entire organization. So I'm looking at players. Obviously, Max Crosby is the big name, but even, some of these other guys, you go look at the wide receivers, a guy like Jacoby Myers, I think a lot of teams could use Jacoby Myers. I think Jacoby Myers is a stud. I think he's one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL, to where I think he could be a very good wide receiver too on a championship level team. And it sounds crazy to say, but I think Jacoby Myers could be of the mold of a Brandon Ayuk. And I don't think that's, when you look at his track record with a successful quarterback, even what he did last year with, the quarterback that they had in Aiden O'Connell, Jacoby Myers is very, very, very good. So I'd be looking at the Raiders saying, hey, this season isn't going to amount to a whole lot for you. Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell broke his thumb, so he's out a couple weeks. So you're rolling with Gardner Minshew. Your season's kind of up in air. You traded Devontae Adams. I think that it is important to keep a Max Crosby, but if you're in a position where, hey, we are selling everything, go out and see what you can get for Max Crosby. If you can go get 2 first-round picks from a championship contending team, go do it. A guy like Jacoby Myers, a guy like Jack Jones, these are the type of players. Hell, even a guy like Michael Mayer, right? Michael Mayer is a guy they drafted 2 years ago, and they just drafted Brock Bowers. So I would be looking at a Michael Mayer saying, hey, if you can go get a third-round pick for him, maybe go out and do it. So the Raiders are one team where they've got some decent talent. I would definitely be looking at them to be sellers. Another team that I think that definitely can be sellers, I think the Tennessee Titans should be sellers. The Tennessee Titans are a team that they are in a position where it's not looking good for them. And they head into the season, and we talked about this before the season, Malik, to where this team had high expectations. A lot of the fans were saying this is the dark horse team. Will Levis, dark horse MVP. This season hasn't turned out to be such, and the record isn't very good, and they've got a lot of pieces on defense I think are absurd. I think that their defense line is one of the best in the NFL, if not a top 2 unit. So they've got guys like Jeffrey Simmons on a massive contract. You got wide receivers. You just trade away DeAndre Hopkins. You've got a Calvin Ridley. You just gave a massive contract to. Maybe go out and see what you can get for him. I like what they got with Tony Pollard, but you got a running back in Tajay Spears who is playing the backup role. He's playing the second fiddle. And I think Tajay Spears could be a very good running back on a championship contending team. So the Tennessee Titans are another team that I really think should be sellers at the deadline. And then when I look at a team that I think potentially, could be another seller, I think the Miami Dolphins could be sellers. It depends on what this whole Tua Tagovailoa situation is, but they're a team that I really think could be sellers because this season hasn't been too hot for them. And I think that the next 2 years with the contracts that they've given out with, looking at, hey, we have Jalen Ramsey. We have these defensive linemen. We have Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle's going to need his contract. Tua just got his contract. These dudes are making a lot of money. So I think that there is a world where the Miami Dolphins could be sellers. So those are 3 teams that I think could be sellers. And then I can get to my buyers in a little bit.
I agree with you for the most part. I think the Raiders could be potential sellers here shortly. I look at certain teams that came in with a lot of expectation. Obviously, the Browns are a team that everybody has kind of been paying attention to a little bit. It seems like they're willing to sell off some assets because things haven't been playing out the way that they're looking for. And Sean Brandon loves what you said about Tyreek Hill, bringing Tyreek Hill home. It'll be interesting, but I also think that if you are a team that has been marred with some injury and stuff like that, it might behoove you to hold on to some guys because, there's always next year. And you hate to take on that mantra, but it's true. I wonder would the Jets be sellers at any point? Like, let's see if things start to go a little south. Will the Jets start selling off some assets if they start to feel that maybe that this, if they start to feel like this team, this season isn't panning out the way they're looking for? I know that there have been calls on Garrett Wilson. Apparently, they have been neglecting them. But it'll be interesting to see what takes place. Daniel, who were some of your buyers?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of teams I'd be looking at, and this is definitely a team that shouldn't necessarily be a buyer. But if Chris Godwin really is out for the year, I think that there's a world where the Buccaneers go and look for a wide receiver. And I think the reason why is, like we discussed on the show many times, this Buccaneers team is really on pace to be a championship contending team. Obviously, you go look at, they got dog walked against the Baltimore Ravens, but I think that this team has the makings to really make some noise in the playoffs, to really make some noise. I think that they can push the Detroit Lions. They can push the Minnesota Vikings. They can push these teams. So I'd be looking to see, hey, they've obviously got Jalen McMillan, who I'm really high on as a wide receiver too now. But there's a world where I think, okay, you could go out and get a wide receiver. Another team that I think could be buyers, and I think should be, the Los Angeles Chargers. I think the Chargers are in a position where maybe that they're okay with how the season's gone. They're 3-3, 3-4. Their receiving core leaves a ton to be desired. Their offense leaves a ton to be desired. And if the Chargers are a team where they really want to make some noise, I would go out and trade for a wide receiver. And hell, even if they don't feel like they're in championship contending mode right now, you could still go trade for a wide receiver to build for your next couple years. So I think that the Chargers are a team where they've got the makings to be something good, and they've got, some very, very talented. I love what their offensive line has done. They're no doubt in my mind a top 5 offensive line in the NFL. So I'd be looking at the Chargers as another team. And then maybe, if anything else, I think the Steelers could obviously be buyers, and that looks at the wide receiver position, and that looks at, hey, are they just content with the roster? Are they content with what they're doing? Their record is nice, but are they really, of the championship contending teams right now? And then if there's anybody else, I think the Lions are in a position, and this kind of goes with my sentiment. The buyers are the teams that are of the upper echelon that are really just looking to reach the Super Bowl. Hence, the Buffalo Bills traded for Mari Cooper. Hence, the Kansas City Chiefs traded for DeAndre Hopkins. This is the type of team that you look at and say, hey, that team could be buyers. Hell, the Green Bay Packers, in my opinion, should be buyers. They are a team where you've got Jordan Love for the next 5, 6, hopefully the next 10 plus years. But how often are you going to, be in a position where you say, hey, right now, I believe this team is a championship contending team. And I think that that's what teams really take for granted, Malik. I think that teams take for granted how good they are in certain moments and they let things pass them by. So a team like the Detroit Lions, there's a world where in 2 years that they fall off. But, they're Ben Johnson, one of the best offense coordinators. He's looking to get a head coaching gig. So without Aiden Hutchinson, I'd be looking at the Detroit Lions as another team where, hey, maybe you go out and get a pass rusher like a Jadeveon Clowney, like a Chase Young, like a Hassan Reddick. Maybe you go out and do that because if I'm the organization, and it's the same thing that we have this discussion with the Cincinnati Bengals, right? Hey, if your team is in the mode to win a championship and you can look at your team and say, hey, I believe we're going to compete with the best teams in the playoffs, and I believe we have a true shot of winning the championship, why the hell not go all in and give up a 3rd round pick or give up a 4th round pick for a guy that you feel like could be a game changer? So that's what I believe. And the only issue I would say is there isn't a lot of game changers that are quote unquote on the trade market. But still, teams like the Lions, I think, could really go out, make a trade, and say, hey, we've got to go and try to capitalize and really try to win a Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, that's for sure. To see how this whole thing shakes out in terms of who will be buyers, who will be sellers. I'd like to see the Bengals be a little more active. Don't know if that's in their plans. Again, if you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or when we upload content. We're live every single day, Monday through Friday. The morning shows are Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and Save the Jungles at 7 p.m. So we greatly appreciate y'all for making us a part of your morning routine each and every single day. I love the point that Wes Hude said. Ravens do need secondary help. Could we see the Ravens potentially make a trade for, to help boost their overall secondary? Because that is a sore spot a little bit this season. That'd be interesting. I will say the Ravens have always done a good job of making the correct moves that keep them in championship contentions. And I'm excited to see. Well, I'm not excited. I hope they don't, but we'll see if they actually do decide to move some pieces around. I'm also curious if the Steelers will be active. Will the Steelers be active? And if the Steelers are active, what are they looking to add? Who might be they looking to acquire? I know Mike Williams has been whispered out there. We all know he's available to be had via trade. So it'll be interesting to see what takes place. I'm curious also if the 49ers will start selling off some assets. I'm curious to see if the 49ers will start selling off some assets. And if so, who might they move? What does that look like exactly? And what does that signify in terms of for the future of a Kyle Shanahan?
Do you think the Saints, this is another team, obviously people are talking Lattimore, and even some people on social media were saying Chris Olave. And I don't know if that's necessarily realistic, but is there a world where you think the Saints could be sellers and trade away the Lattimores of the world, trade away the Chris Olaves?
I don't see them trading away any Chris Olave. I mean, Lattimore is always obviously out there. I feel like people have been throwing his name out there for quite some time. I look at it and I say, the Saints are in cap hell, and they constantly try to do things to try to manipulate the cap to their favor, whether they be pushing contracts down, moving money around. But they keep signing guys. They keep trying to find a way to make guys available. I wonder if a guy like Chase Young is a person that the Saints might look to trade off. Obviously, it's on a 1-year deal, so a team will probably be just getting a half-year rental from them. But for a championship contending team, is that worth it? Is that worth it for a team that's trying to contend for a championship that needs help in the pass rush department? Does a Chase Young make sense? Sean Brennan says, do you think the win last night takes Cooper Kupp off the board? No, I think for the right price, the right offer, I think they'll be willing to move, because you got to look at the long-term outlook. And if you're not, seriously contending for a championship this year, you might want to trade off some of these assets. I think any functioning organization should operate that way. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of functioning organizations out there that work that way. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Cooper Kupp situation and where his ideal landing spots might be. But I do want to get over to the Bengals talk before we head over to our fantasy football talk. But before we do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live, when we upload content. The question is, will the Bengals offense regain form? Last 2 weeks, they've gone up against some pretty good defensive lines, kind of stymied them a little bit. But is this the week where Joe Burrow and this offense starts to round into form again. I definitely think that the Eagles' defensive line is no joke. I definitely believe that they have some talent in the secondary for sure. So it's not going to be easy, but I think that there's a clear path to make life a little less hectic, and that's getting your tight ends involved, letting them open things up for some of your receiving core. You have to at least pose the threat to throw to your tight ends and show that you're willing to use some of these guys as weapons down the field, not just as check downs, not just as when a play is blowing up, we're just going to check it down to you really quickly. Like, so there's some things that I definitely think that they should be looking to do. It'll be interesting to see if they're going to be able to um, get the tight ends involved in the offense a whole lot more. That's what my expectation is. I think that this is going to be a good offensive showing from the Bengals, unless you allow Jalen Carter to wreck your game plan. And Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter are guys that I do look at, and I say Cordell Volson and Alex Kappa have their work cut out for them this week. They have their work cut out for them this week. If they're able to keep those guys at bay and able to do some stuff offensively to try to, I guess, alleviate some of the pressure on those, maybe sliding some guys their way. It's a little hard to do, obviously, with them lining up on the inside. So it's almost like you're fending for yourself. And Ted Karras has to pick a side. Am I going to help Cordell Volson or am I going to help Alex Kapp out? It's going to be interesting, though. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Dan, what are your thoughts?
I think that when I look at how these two teams match up, I think that the Cincinnati Bengals offense, it's definitely concerning how they looked the past 2 weeks, but the thing that gives me confidence is how they looked the first 4 weeks of the season, right? And I think that they were the first 5 weeks of the season, they were one of the best offenses in the NFL. And when you have a quarterback like Joe Burrow, I'm not too concerned about how they're going to look the rest of the season. So I do think that this is the week that they do kind of regain their form. And I think that it really is just game plan and game script dependent, right? You go look at the past 2 weeks. They were grit and grind games. The New York Giants game was a very slow, methodical, defensive led game. And it really is the thing of they just looked basic. They just looked like they were chugging along. You go look at that Giants game, the end of the game, right? You two straight runs, and then you rely on Joe Burrow to scramble out left and then make a big time play in a big time moment. So I think that this offense is going to find their groove. And I think that the Cincinnati Bengals offense is not like other teams. So where there are a ton of question marks. Shit, who is your wide receiver? Shit, who is your tight end? Who is like those are questions that other teams seriously have to answer, right? And that's the part where the Bengals are in a very good position. The 49ers have to look and say, hey, who is our new wide receiver? Debo's out. Brandon Ayuk is out. Christian McCaffrey is out. Jordan Mason is out. The Cincinnati Bengals don't have that. They don't. And they are in a very, very, very good spot right now because they have everything at their disposal, which is why you have to pinpoint this on the play caller and the quarterback. And that's what I believe right now, because there is seriously no excuse for this offense to not perform right now. They are fully healthy. They are now 7 games into the season. They have had a lot of time to gel. And I think that they do really start to continue to round out into form. I do that they regain their form. So like I said, I think that this offense was explosive early in the season. I think the past 2 weeks, they have shown serious signs of that. And I think the biggest signs of that are Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow. So I think that this offense and how that they look this week, I think we are going to see a more involved Chase Brown. I think that that's something that, the Cincinnati Bengals fans have been clamoring for. And I think that we do see him involved a lot more on the running game this upcoming week. But this offense is always going to live and die by the passing attack. And I think that this is the type of game to where if I were to project how this game goes, I think that this is a high flying matchup. I think that both offenses really come out, punch for punch. And if I had to guess, I think that the Bengals have no serious problem. At the end of the game, we're going to look and say, hey, the Bengals offense put up points. Maybe they didn't do it in the timely manner, but I'm very confident this offense will put up points. So, like I said, I think I'm confident Jamar Chase, both of them look great right now. And I do think that the X factor is, hey, if you can get the tight ends involved, like you said, I really have no concern about this team because T's look damn good. Jamar's look very good. You just got to get these guys the ball. So,
Yep, I agree. And we'll be live after every Bengals game, talking it through, the good, the bad, and the ugly. as we do our sit down recap show. It'll be me and Zim Huda and Daniel going live this Sunday, talking you through Bengals versus Eagles. Do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live, when we upload content. Listen, it wouldn't be a Fantasy Football Friday if we didn't have one half of the law firm, Mike O'Hara, joining us. Without further ado, Mike O'Hara, what's going on, man?
Morning, everyone. Morning. How we doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good.
I got a question for you guys to open it up. Actually,
okay.
I didn't catch Thursday Night Football last night. I'm planning on catching the condensed replay tomorrow probably. But I heard the refs had Rams. Is that true?
That has been the talk. Some egregious missed calls seem to have influenced the game, and people are upset about it. People want the NFL officiating crew held accountable. I guess we probably should have talked about that, honestly. So I appreciate the question, O'Hara. I really do.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely think that obviously you hate when the referees calls or miscalls or negligence influence the game in such a big way. And I think that this is a situation in which no matter what sports you look at, whether it's the NBA or the NFL, people tend to really have started to put a magnifying glass on how these referees operate and sort of the missed calls, because they are the judge and jury out there, right? It's really up to them to call the game the correct way. And, you just hope that we'd get a better showing from guys that are literally paid to do their job. But it seems like they did have a Rams money line yesterday. Daniel, I know that you and Mike need to get to your fantasy football talk, and I'm curious, right? I'm taking little tidbits from Mike. Make no mistake about it. I'm taking little tidbits from Mike, because when I make my triumphant return next year, I want to make sure that I have everything necessarily that I need, if you will, to have some success. So, Daniel.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about week 8, and let's talk about some of the best starts and sits. So I think yesterday we did a good job, and you obviously discussed some of the biggest takeaways. So let's start out with one of your starts for the week, and give us, it can be any position, but who's a guy that you think has an amazing matchup that people aren't necessarily just shooing him in to be, in their lineups?
Yeah, I'll give you two here. One quarterback and one wide receiver.
Okay.
One wide receiver I'm really excited to be starting this week is Jackson Smith and Jigba. Obviously an expanded opportunity, expanded volume role for Smith and Jigba without DK Metcalf in the lineup. So that's just a reason to be excited about him to begin with. But this is a really, really good schematic matchup with the Bills defense. The Bills defense, they play a lot of that shell coverage, that umbrella coverage that just funnels targets to slot receivers. Jackson Smith and Jigba has run 80% of his routes this season out of the slot. And the Bills defense has allowed the second most targets and the third most receptions to receivers lined up out of the slot this season. So this is just a really good setup for a super, super high volume day for Jackson Smith and Jigba. And I think that he is a really, really strong start in PPR leagues. And then the quarterback that I'm going to name here is one that you might not really expect. It's Bo Nix. I'm very comfortable starting Bo Nix this week if I'm kind of like in a situation where maybe I drafted Patrick Mahomes, or maybe I just have one of those like fringe guys. Maybe I've been riding Baker Mayfield. If Bo Nix is out of my waiver wire, I'm going to pick him up and I'm starting him this week. Bo Nix has been like, he's pushing for that elite rushing tier. Like he's like solidifying himself as a legitimate dual threat quarterback. And the weird part is like the only part that really hasn't been there is the passing game. Like he's rushed for over 60 yards in 2 straight games. He's averaging 6.3 points per game as fantasy points per game as a rusher over his last 5 games. So he's really like setting himself up with a really solid floor because of his rushing production. But now I think this is a week where he can really pick apart the Carolina defense. The Carolina defense dead last in rushing yards allowed per game, or yards allowed per passing play, and they're allowing 2 passing touchdowns per game. They've been picked apart by just about every single quarterback they've faced in recent weeks. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about a defense that allowed Marcus Mariota to go for nearly 20 fantasy points off the bench last week. It's like, this is one of the worst defenses that we've seen in recent memory, and I would be more than fine starting Bo Nix this week.
Awesome. So we got a question here from Sean Brennan. This kind of goes into the point. I'm curious. Look at the Packers situation, right? Look at the Packers wide receivers. Obviously, Jaden Reed, the Romeo Doubs. Do you feel like his numbers are sustainable after suspension? He's been putting up pretty good numbers. So, what's your thoughts on the Packers wide receivers when it comes to fantasy?
Sustainable, I'm not so sure. Targeted a really high rate, especially last week. But when it comes to the Packers receiving core this week, I really want to be jamming them into my lineups. The Jags defense is in the similar vein to the Carolina defense. They've been just destroyed through the air by every single team they faced. I mean, we saw Drake May have his way with them in London last week, and they ranked dead last in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers this season. But I'm really comfortable starting anyone from the Packers receiving core this week just because of how favorable a matchup this is. And Dobbs, I think he provides the steadiest floor because he is like that full-time player. They rotate out those other three guys to a pretty large degree, but last week and pretty consistently, you'll see Dobbs over an 80% route participation. So he's kind of that guy who's out there pretty consistently. So I do think that he is going to be the safest option of the three. But in this matchup, I think you can start any of the four receivers if you have to.
I love it. I love it. So let's look at some of the matchups that aren't so favorable for some people, and you can discuss whether it's just week 8 starts and sits or even some people that you're fading the rest of the season. So is there any matchups, whether it's, you look at a dominant defensive line or you look at a dominant secondary or you look at a team that just has a bad quarterback that, hey, you're staying away from this guy in week 8?
Yeah, I've got some names that are kind of fit into all three of those little descriptors that you just had. One is is Tony Pollard against the Detroit Lions this week. I mean, nothing against Tony Pollard. He really looks like last year he kind of looked like he had lost a step after that tightrope surgery that he had 2 years ago, heading into the season. And now he does look like he's all the way back. He's having those explosive plays. He's making plays out as a pass catcher. But I really just think that he's going to be taken out by game script really quick against the Lions. We saw last week what can happen to Tony Pollard's fantasy value when the Titans are playing from behind. They were chasing the Bills for the entirety of the second half last week, and Tony Pollard had one of his worst weeks of the year. So I just think that this is a spot where he's going to be taken out of the game rather quickly, a reduced workload. He's been pushing for 20 touches pretty consistently. I don't really see that happening against the Lions. So I just based on his projected volume and what I think this game is going to set up to be in the Titans in a trailing situation for most of the game, I'm not comfortable starting Tony Pollard. And then another one, just with the offensive quality and quarterback situation, I'm not starting Deontay Johnson this week. I talked about it yesterday a little bit, talking about him as a sell on the trading block, but I think this is a pretty comfortable bench this week. We've seen Bryce Young play for what has he started 18 games at this point in his NFL career, and it's been abysmal. The 2 games with Bryce Young to start the season, Deontay Johnson combined for fewer than 9 PPR points. It's just this isn't the Carolina Panthers aren't going to be sustaining drives. There aren't going to be scoring opportunities, and Bryce Young, every statistical measure, the eye test, everything tells you that he's just bad. It's just not, there's no way to work around it. There's not very many numbers that you can pull out of a hat to make it look like he's good. He's just not an NFL caliber quarterback. And Deontay Johnson, I don't think you can feel comfortable starting him at all.
Wow. Yeah. So I've got one more question for you, and then we'll go to Michael Lewis's question. He said, should I start Kyler Murray or Jameis Winston this week as my QB1?
It's really weird that we're at that point in the season, but Jameis, I understand the intriguing the intrigue there. It's he's about as aggressive as they come as a quarterback, willing to push the ball downfield, borderline reckless at times. And the Ravens provide a really good matchup just because they give up a whole lot of passing yards. They give up the most passing yards per game in the NFL, but a lot of that is because they're playing teams against them are playing from behind at a pretty high rate. But still, the secondary really isn't what it was last year. The defense isn't nearly as locked down, but I do still think you have to go Kyler here. Jameis, no true wide receiver 1. Really, this offense is going to funnel through David Njoku. And just the rushing upside that Kyler provides, I still think you gotta go with him. But yeah, it's a legitimate question just given the matchup and Jameis's mentality as a quarterback.
So I've got one more question for you. And just looking at this week, give me 2 players that have an amazing matchup, right? 2 players, and this could be people that everybody's expecting to do well, but hey, these are your two guys that you're planting your flag saying, hey, no matter what, I think these two guys have an absolute master class this week. Like these two guys dominate this week. And who are those two? And it doesn't even have to be two, it can just be one, but who are your guys that no doubt are going to dominate this week?
I would say that I think the names that I gave earlier, not Deontay Johnson, Bo Nix and Jackson Smith and Jigba are my names for that. But I'll throw in a third here. I am going with it's weird to say this, but Jalen Waddle, just because he's not been in fantasy consideration since Tua Tagovailoa has been sidelined, but let's just not forget how good this guy can be. Top 10 in yards, targets, and fantasy points per route run last season. This guy can compete with the elite wide receivers from a fantasy perspective. And as long as Tua's back, I'm jamming this guy into my lineup.
All right. That's beautiful. All right. Fantasy week 8. There we go.
Mike, we appreciate you as always, man, for joining the show. Looking forward to having you back here next week as we talk all things through. I hope that you have a very good fantasy football weekend this week. And again, we still got to text back and forth and see if we can probably get you in the studio here this upcoming week, man. But Mike, we appreciate you. We hope that you enjoy football this weekend and that your fantasy football teams crush it as well. But
I always love coming on the show, Malik.
Yes, sir, man. Make sure you guys give Mike a follow. So his socials are down below in the description. But Mike, we'll see you next week.
Yep, I'll be around. See you guys.
Yes, sir. See you, my man. If you guys do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. It doesn't feel like it, but the show is kind of flying by a little bit. Flying by a little bit. I want to get to the team over in Denver, Daniel. The Nuggets lost last night. They look like a shell of themselves. Should we be concerned about the Denver Nuggets? Daniel, what say you?
Should we be concerned about them? I think there is room for concern. And I think my biggest concern, Malik, is I'm concerned about the other teams in the West. And that's where you look at these, sports, and you look at the NFL, for example, and the NFL really is a sport to where you have to focus what's inside your locker room and say, hey, as long as we trust what's inside our locker room, we're confident in our team that we're going to put up, the best possible performance against anybody. And that stays true in the NBA. But I think that there's a different side of things when you look at these teams in the West, Malik. I think these teams are good. I think that these teams are elite. I think if we were to make a comparison, I really do think it's like an NFL having a, 4, but see, these teams aren't even doing well. Like 4 Detroit Lions, for example. I think the Detroit Lions are dominant regular season teams, and teams that you just put them up against another team, they will always have a chance in the postseason. It's like a conference having 4 or 5 of those teams, and I think that's what the Western Conference has, and that's what I am concerned. You look at the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Oklahoma City Thunder are legit title contenders. They're without their center, Isaiah Hartenstein, who I've been hugely excited about. And they went out and they dog walked the Denver Nuggets on opening night. The Thunder are an amazing team, so they're a team. And then you look at the Denver Nuggets, they've got arguably the top 2 player in the world in Nikola Jokic, but the situation around him isn't elite. It's good. Michael Porter Jr. is a very good three-point shooter. They've got a consistent rotation. They are a smooth running operation, but you look at the biggest thing, their bench, right? It's a lot of young faces, a lot of new faces. Russell Westbrook's a new face. So it's a lot of growing pains that they have to go through. So am I concerned that they're going to be in the picture? No, but I'm seriously concerned about this team, right? You go look at some of these other teams, the Minnesota Timberwolves, for example. They're a team where I believe late in the season, they're really going to start to hit their groove. And I think they are a much deeper team than the Denver Nuggets. They've got a guy named Rob Dillingham, who was one of my favorite rookies coming out of the draft. And I think he overtakes a Mike Conley. And they've got Dante DiVincenzo off the bench, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They have, elite depth. There are a lot of teams in this Western Conference. The Dallas Mavericks came out and looked absurd last night. Klay Thompson, for everybody who was down on him, all Warriors fans saying this dude is washed, Buddy Hield is better. Klay Thompson went out, drained 6 threes, the most threes by a debut for the Dallas Mavericks in their history. So I'm concerned about these other teams in the NBA. Malik, the talent gap is and the talent level is absurd right now. You got teams like the Boston Celtics, you got the Minnesota Timberwolves. There's so many teams in the NBA, specifically in the Western Conference, that, hey, if I'm the Denver Nuggets, I am concerned about. I am concerned about, hey, what does my future look like? What does, you know, it's not going to get any easier than it was 2 years ago. And I'm not saying it was super easy, but these teams are far and away much better now than they were before. And hell, we can even discuss the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are going to be up there. And the Lakers were a team where the past 2 years, I believed that they were going to beat the Nuggets, and they didn't. I think the Lakers got a better shot to beat them now than they did before.
Yeah.
So,
Lakers look like an actual functioning
yes.
team. So I definitely agree with you on that, with that sentiment.
And one thing about the Lakers, real quick, I saw, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but they're having fun at practice. Like, I don't know if you saw the clip. Like, hey, these dudes are JJ Redick is training with them. Like, they're doing fun things. I think that there's just so much talent in the NBA. And to be honest with you, that's what my concern is. It's not just talent. These teams are well-oiled machines. Like, the only teams that aren't really well-oiled machines are the Phoenix Suns, are, like the Sacramento Kings, but these are teams that still have serious talent on their roster. So all around, I'm concerned for this Nuggets team. Not that they won't get it together, but there's a real world where they don't have the number 1 seed. They don't have the number 2 seed. We could see them getting the 4th, 5th seed, and then you got to go, play from behind. And it's tough to win in the NBA. You got to win 3 straight series, 7-game series, and I would really need to see their bench unit really step up. And quite frankly, Malik, this is going to come down to Jamal Murray. I think Jokic wasn't as aggressive yesterday, but I'm just, if you want me to be honest, I think this is probably the 3rd or 4th best team in the West. So we'll see how they go, but stars got to play, and stars got to show up.
Well, you also need Russell Westbrook to make his shots too. He got so many open looks yesterday, and he just failed to capitalize on them. But do us a favor, guys. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications. Speed round. Want to get out of here. Let's give some of our favorite plays for today. I'm only going to give about 2. The rest you can find on the TWSN Patreon. Really quickly, I guess I'll start us off. One of my favorite plays in the NBA tonight is Ben Simmons over 5.5 assists. Can't rely on Ben Simmons consistently to be a scorer. Can't really rely on him to even be aggressive with the rebound, but I can rely on him to pass the rock. It's something that he excels at. Going up against the Orlando Magic tonight, I think that's a spot where he has a lot of success. He had about 8 assists his last game. I think he has some success. Another play that I like is Dalton Connect over 5.5 points. The Lakers take on the Suns today. Suns don't have a good bench. I think Lakers are going to be able to take advantage. I also think the Lakers are going to win this game. I think the Lakers seem like a more functioning team. JJ Redick actually has them running plays, pick and rolls. Everybody's touching the rock. It's like a miracle. This Lakers team looks completely different. So those are my 2 favorite plays. And I'm tempted to take Ben Simmons over 6.5 points because that's what his point total's at. I don't know if I love that. I like Jared Allen as well to have 10 rebounds tonight against the Detroit Pistons. That's a sweet spot sitting at -160. Again, if you want all of our plays, subscribe to the TWSN Patreon. Link is right down below. Daniel, what are your 2 favorite plays for tonight's NBA action?
Yeah, I'll give them pretty quickly. I think that there's a guy who plays center position for the Philadelphia 76ers that is the starting center at this moment. It's Andre Drummond. So I think that Andre Drummond, his rebound prop is extremely high. It's at 13.5. But he had 13 last game. He's going up against a Raptors team that respectfully has 0 size on the interior. They got Jakob Poeltl, but that's it. So Andre Drummond over 13.5 rebounds. And if you guys want another one, I like Jalen Brunson today against Indiana Pacers. This was a matchup we saw in the playoffs last year. This is a matchup where Rick Carlisle and the Pacers are consistently, consistent with their defense. Hey, we're going to play man up. We're going to play straight up one-on-one. We're not going to double team. They didn't double team Jalen Brunson until game 6 of the playoff or game 5 of the playoffs. And Jalen Brunson's line's at 29.5. He scored 22 points, I believe, in 17 minutes against the Boston Celtics. And this is a situation where the Pacers defense is fine. They're whatever. So Jalen Brunson over 29.5. I am a huge, huge, huge fan of that.
Absolutely. So we got some good plays for you guys. The rest of our plays will be on the TWSN Patreon. Also, UFC 308 is taking place this week, and all my plays will be up, ready to go as I release my UFC 308 guidebook. We've had success these last couple of pay-per-views. I expect this to be successful as well. We hope that you guys enjoy your football weekend as well. Remember, there's only one way you should be waking up, talking sports, enjoying the conversation, and that is the right way. We'll be back live Sunday to recap the Bengals-Eagles game. We'll be back Monday for another episode of the Sit Down Morning Show with Malik Wright. Appreciate you guys making us a part of your morning routine. We'll see you then.
So kick back, relax, the team